Year's Day, a time for fresh starts, clean slates, resolutions written with hope and optimism. Across America, people wake up to the promise of 365 new days stretching ahead of them. Days filled with possibility, potential, and second chances. But for 24-year-old Meredith Emerson, January 1st, 2008 would not be a new beginning. It would be an ending. She woke up that morning planning to conquer Blood Mountain, one of Georgia's most beautiful and challenging trails. She had her hiking boots, her loyal dog, Ella, and her whole life ahead of her. What she didn't have was any idea that a predator was already on that mountain, waiting, watching, hunting. By the time the sun set on New Year's Day, Meredith would be fighting for her life, and within days, her name would be linked to something far more sinister, a serial killer who had been hiding in America's national forests for years, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. This is the story of how a New Year's hike became a nightmare, and how one monster turned paradise into a hunting ground. Welcome to Dark Files. New Year's Day, 2008. While most Americans were nursing hangovers, 24-year-old Meredith Hope Emerson was lacing up her hiking boots. She had something better in mind, a challenging trek up Blood Mountain, the highest peak on Georgia's portion of the Appalachian Trail. This was a woman who graduated with honors from the University of Georgia with a degree in French, who had studied abroad in France, who had earned her blue belt in Aikido martial arts. She was training her beloved dog, Ella, a loyal companion who went everywhere with her, to become a therapy dog. Friends and family knew her as someone who babysat countless children, who volunteered, who lived life with purpose and joy. At 5 feet 4 inches and 120 pounds, Meredith was petite, but don't let that fool you. She was tough, disciplined, and prepared. She worked as a sales manager in Beaufort, Georgia, and when she wasn't working, she was outdoors, hiking, training, exploring the wilderness she loved so much. Blood Mountain. The name itself carries an ominous weight. Located in Vogel State Park within the Chattahoochee National Forest, it's a popular destination for experienced hikers. The Freeman Trail offers breathtaking views, challenging terrain, and on this particular day, something far more sinister, because Meredith wasn't alone on that trail. Several witnesses would later report seeing a mysterious older man with his own dog following her. He appeared to be in his 60s, weathered with an intense stare that made people uncomfortable. His name was Gary Michael Hilton, a 61-year-old drifter known around the local hiking community for his strange behavior, vicious temper, and his dog Dandy, who he walked along these very trails. Hilton wasn't out for exercise, he was hunting. What Meredith didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that Gary Hilton had already killed 3 people in the past 3 months. The bodies were piling up across 3 states, all within national forests. An elderly couple bludgeoned and shot in North Carolina's Pisgah National Forest, a nurse decapitated in Florida's Appalachian National Forest, and now, on New Year's Day 2008, their paths would cross on Blood Mountain. January 1st, 2008, started like any other hike. Meredith and Ella hit the Freeman Trail, connecting to the spur trail that linked with the Appalachian Trail and the Byron Herbert Reese parking lot. Witnesses saw them. They also saw him, the older man with the dog, keeping pace, watching, waiting. But Meredith never came home that night. By January 2nd, her friends knew something was terribly wrong. Meredith was responsible, communicative, punctual. She wouldn't just vanish. They began searching immediately, scouring the trails, calling her name, hoping for any sign. Nothing. On January 3rd, authorities located her 1995 Chevrolet Cavalier still parked at the trailhead. Inside, they found her water bottle, a dog leash, and most chillingly, her police baton. Meredith, trained in martial arts and always prepared, had brought protection. But it hadn't been enough. The investigation moved quickly. Witnesses came forward describing the older man with the dog. Someone knew him, Gary Hilton, the local drifter. He was immediately announced as a person of interest. Police desperately wanted to question him. but Hilton had vanished. Then, on January 4th, a small miracle. Ella, Meredith's beloved dog, was found wandering in a Kroger parking lot in Cumming, Georgia, approximately 60 miles away from Blood Mountain. She was alive, confused, but unharmed. Hilton had let her go. He couldn't bring himself to kill the dog. The next day, January 5th, a dumpster near a Quick Trip parking lot in Cumming revealed the horrifying truth. Inside, investigators found Meredith's bloodied clothing, her wallet, driver's license, University of Georgia ID card, and a blood-stained car seat belt. Someone was trying to dispose of evidence, and that someone was running out of time. On January 4th, the same day Ella was found, a sharp-eyed witness at a Chevron gas station in DeKalb County made a phone call that would crack this case wide open. "The guy you're looking for is cleaning out his van." Police arrived within minutes and stopped Gary Michael Hilton before he could finish bleaching the interior of his 2001 Chevrolet Astro van. Crime scene analysts immediately began processing the vehicle, and what they found was damning blood evidence that matched Meredith Emerson's DNA. 5 hours later, thanks to 2 additional anonymous tips reporting that Hilton was vacuuming his van at a local establishment, he was arrested and transferred to county jail. He was initially charged with kidnapping based on the mountain of material evidence connecting him to Meredith's disappearance. But where was Meredith? While Hilton sat in a federal prison in Atlanta, search teams scoured a massive 90-square-mile area of the Chattahoochee National Forest. Investigators examined Hilton's van more closely and noticed something critical. The rear seatbelt was missing. It matched the blood-stained seatbelt found among Meredith's belongings in that dumpster. Hilton had used it to restrain her. The clock was ticking. Days had passed since Meredith was last seen. The likelihood of finding her alive was dropping by the hour. Prosecutors made a calculated decision. They offered Hilton a deal. Take the death penalty off the table in exchange for leading them to Meredith's body. On January 7th, 2008, 6 days after she disappeared, Gary Hilton agreed. He led investigators to the Dawson Forest Management Area, a remote section of wilderness. There, they found what remained of Meredith Hope Emerson. She had been decapitated, though the medical examiner determined this was done post-mortem in a deliberate attempt to prevent identification. Hilton's confession was as cold as it was calculated. He claimed he had abducted Meredith to steal her bank cards and PIN number. When she initially gave him the wrong PIN, either deliberately or because she was terrified and confused, he kept her captive for 4 days, repeatedly demanding the correct number. During those 4 days, he held her against her will. Then, when he decided she was no longer useful, he beat her to death with her own police baton, the very weapon she had brought to protect herself. In a statement that would make investigators' blood run cold, Hilton said, "It was hard. You gotta remember, we had spent several good days together." Several good days. As if kidnapping, torturing, and murdering a young woman could somehow be reframed as quality time. On January 30th, 2008, Gary Hilton pleaded guilty to Meredith Emerson's murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 30 years. But as investigators dug deeper into Hilton's life, a horrifying pattern emerged. This wasn't his first kill. It wasn't even close. October 21st, 2007. The Bryants, just 2.5 months before Meredith's murder, an elderly couple, John Bryant, 80, and his wife Irene, 84, went for a hike in North Carolina's Pisgah National Forest. They were avid hikers who loved the outdoors, enjoying their retirement together. They never came home. When family members reported them missing after 2 weeks of silence, a massive search was launched. On November 10th, searchers found Irene's body on the Barnett Branch Trail, covered with leaves. She had been bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. Her husband, John, was still missing. Bank records showed someone had used the Bryant's bank card to withdraw $300 from an ATM in Ducktown, Tennessee. Surveillance footage captured an older Caucasian man wearing a yellow rain jacket with the hood obscuring his face. On February 3rd, 2008, Just weeks after Meredith's body was found, a hunter discovered human remains in Nantahala National Forest. A skull, pelvis, and spine scattered across the forest floor. It was John Bryant. During later court proceedings, Hilton would describe how he killed Irene immediately on the trail, then kidnapped John to extort his bank details before shooting him in the head with a .22 Magnum and dumping his body in the switchbacks. December 3, 2007, Cheryl Dunlap. Just weeks before Meredith disappeared, 46-year-old Cheryl Hodges Dunlap, a nurse at Florida State University in Tallahassee, failed to show up for work. This was completely out of character. Her colleagues immediately knew something was wrong. Her white Toyota Camry was found abandoned north of the county line. A search party of 180 people was organized, desperately hoping to find her alive. On December 16th, a hunter named Ronnie Rentz was walking through the Appalachian National Forest with his dogs when he discovered a decapitated, decomposing body. DNA confirmed it was Cheryl Dunlap. Someone had used her ATM card 5 times in Tallahassee, withdrawing $700 from her account. Security footage showed a man matching Hilton's description. Tips came in about a strange homeless man with a dog driving a green 2001 Chevrolet Astro van, the same van. Prosecutors would later prove that Hilton had abducted Dunlap from the Leon Sinks geological area and held her captive for 2 days before killing and decapitating her. He tried to destroy evidence by incinerating her head and hands in a fire pit before dumping the body. The pattern. All of Hilton's victims shared commonalities. They were hiking in national forests. They were alone or vulnerable. He held them captive to extract banking information. He used blunt force trauma or decapitation. He disposed of bodies in remote wilderness areas. But the biggest mystery remains. How many more victims are there? Authorities suspect Hilton in several other disappearances, including the 1997 murder of Judy Smith, whose body was found in a similar condition near where Hilton had left another victim. Hilton was a drifter who had been roaming national forests for decades. He knew the trails intimately. He knew where to hide bodies. He knew how to avoid detection. How long had he been doing this? And how many hikers never made it off those trails? Gary Michael Hilton, known as the National Forest Serial Killer, was ultimately held accountable for his crimes, but not before he had destroyed multiple families and shattered the sense of safety that had once defined America's national forests. The sentences: January 31st, 2008, life in prison for Meredith Emerson's murder, Georgia. February 22nd, 2011, death sentence for Cheryl Dunlap's murder, Florida. April 2013, life in prison without parole for the murders of John and Irene Bryant, North Carolina. Hilton currently sits on Florida's death row, though appeals continue to delay his execution. Meredith Hope Emerson's death sent shockwaves through the hiking community. Her story became a rallying cry for increased safety awareness on trails, particularly for solo hikers. In October 2008, the first Ella's Run 5K and 1 mile fun run was held in Meredith's honor, a tradition that continues to this day. The event raises money for organizations that support women's safety and outdoor education. On January 19, 2008, more than 100 people gathered to hike in Blairsville, Georgia, to honor Meredith's memory. A memorial service in Athens drew hundreds more. Her beloved dog Ella was returned to family members, where she lived out her days surrounded by love. But the questions remain. Why did Hilton let Ella live but kill Meredith? He claimed he couldn't bring himself to kill the dog. Was there some twisted morality in his mind that allowed him to spare an animal but brutalize human beings? How did a man with such a vicious criminal pattern operate undetected for so long? Was it simply because national forests are vast and remote? Or did authorities miss warning signs? And perhaps most haunting of all, how many more bodies are out there, still undiscovered in the endless wilderness? Gary Hilton preyed on people at their most vulnerable, when they were alone, far from help, surrounded by the beauty of nature that was supposed to bring peace. He weaponized the wilderness itself, using isolation as his accomplice. National forests cover over 193 million acres in the United States. They're beautiful, serene, life-affirming places where millions of people hike, camp, and reconnect with nature every year. But they're also places where people can vanish without a trace. Meredith Hope Emerson went hiking on New Year's Day to start 2008 with adventure and joy. Instead, she became the victim of a calculating predator who had been hiding in plain sight for years, possibly decades. Her death reminds us that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like an older man walking his dog on a trail. Sometimes it smiles and asks for help. Sometimes it waits patiently for the perfect moment to strike. Blood Mountain still stands. Hikers still climb it. The views are still breathtaking. If you found this story as chilling as we did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Dark Files for more deep dives into the darkest corners of true crime. See you in the next one.